Kicking a LinkedIn hornet's nest, an inadvertent study in internet discourse. Welcome to an Overthinker's Almanac. Today, I want to share a surprising, unplanned part 3 of my examination of whataboutism in internet discourse. Let's review an unintentional case study I created last Friday. I set out to critique whataboutism, provide an example, and suggest a potential means of responding Socratically, and it instantly became a mirror of itself. AI called me thoughtful but combative. The other guy, knowledgeable but abrasive. We were both right, we were both wrong, and nobody was listening anyway. The irony, my post proved the point better than I ever could have. Oh, the irony. You know the strategy. Someone lobs a supposedly definitive stat in the middle of a conversation with the intention of distracting or shutting it down entirely. That's whataboutism. In this case, my example was a data point I've repeatedly seen used in the sustainability discussions, that plastic is only 1% of the material economy. This is the mic drop of what I half-jokingly call the plastic defender army. So, I wrote about it in Who Does Whataboutism Actually Influence? I pointed out how these kinds of comments distract us from the real conversation, flatten nuance, and make meaningful dialogue nearly impossible, particularly on the internet. I then shared a shorter follow-up, including a 90-second version and a LinkedIn summary calling out this specific comment. Admittedly, I was intentionally less neutral and began with a reference to Alfred E. Neumann to call out my perception of the nonchalant attitude that plastic waste isn't a big deal, so what me worry. So yeah, I admit it. I was emotional and frustrated. I kicked the bear to see what would happen while trying to engage in discourse on derailing discourse. And then suddenly, my post became an immediate case study in the very thing I was critiquing. The derailer showed up right on cue, as the polarizing thumbnail intended. My post was designed to communicate that keeping an online discussion focused is impossible, and it absolutely was. What followed was a firestorm of data as a cudgel, claims that I've read 5,000 studies, and tone policing that managed to embody every behavior I was calling out, including the polarizing nature of my post. Depending on your perspective, this made the whole episode either maddening or kind of hilarious, or, as I pointed out regarding whataboutism fights, a situation to avoid entirely. So, in the spirit of transparency, and maybe a bit of masochism, I want to walk you through what happened, how I processed it, and what it taught me about online discourse. The firestorm, how it played out. Obviously, I was the instigator here. Though I intended to teach how to recognize whataboutisms and effectively respond, I began in a stoic deficit. I immediately ceded moral high ground with comedic, polarized references and labeling. The Stoics would say I failed to control the only thing I can control, my initial response. Like many internet posts, I had an intended audience, and it was those who already agreed with my original proposition that there are those on the pro-plastic side who repeatedly shut down conversation. Yet my positioning inherently limited the effectiveness of my post, and by poking a stick at the nest of a core fact repeatedly used for this very purpose, what did I expect? It didn't take long for the hornets to show up. The most prolific responder represented the exact behaviors I called out, leading with their credentials and depth of knowledge.
I've read 5,000 studies unpaid to share the science for free verbatim.
However, potentially mirroring back the same tone that I presented against their worldview with my original post, it became more personally directed at me and my lack of authority to question their expertise.
Surely a polymath is wise enough to check the data.
While more aggressive, superior to most internet exchanges, at a minimum they'd read my profile before engaging. With an extended back and forth, it perfectly demonstrated the dynamic that I was critiquing, repeatedly wielding credentials and data like a cudgel, not an invitation for more discussion. Attempting to recover from my initial polarizing position, the discussion allowed me to get my Stoic and Socratic reps in, including responding to the primary commenter trying to redirect to the post intention. I'm on team have better discussions. The 1% stat isn't dangerous because it's wrong, it's how often it's used to end a post, not to deepen it. The discussion continued, questioning my credentials and authority relative to theirs. As I called out in the video, comments spiraled into fact-for-fact skirmishes, substitution debates, and tone policing. The irony couldn't have been sharper. By derailing the conversation into the weeds, they proved my point better than I ever could have. My post about whataboutism had been hijacked by whataboutism. Enter the neutral observer. At a certain point, I decided to step back and hand the whole exchange to a different kind of participant, a generative AI model. I wanted an unbiased perspective without my emotional baggage or anyone else's ego in the mix. So I outsourced the Monday morning Socratic analysis to Claude, a model I don't have a history with, to get its analysis as a neutral observer. Quick note, I removed all names and links and only referred to myself as the original author to avoid any AI people-pleasing bias. Each participant was given a letter to differentiate them. Claude Model 4.5 was used. As expected, AI was critical of my initial approach, demonstrating the disadvantage and role I played in the degradation of the discourse. Reviewing the video script, Claude called out that my initial tone came off as combative. Pivoting back to a Socratic approach and attempting to redirect the discussion to my point, I risked sounding like I was critiquing style while dodging substance, and refusing to engage in the technical debate sought by some commenters, which was intentional, but does speak to an evolution of how to engage in such a comment war effectively. Fortunately, Claude did give me some credit that I
1. Was a thoughtful communicator who cares deeply about discourse quality. 2. Maintained composure and civility. 3. Demonstrated self-awareness about the dynamics of online arguments.
Claude then provided an analysis of the other commenter from the perspective of a neutral observer. The expert from above was deemed
1. Knowledgeable but abrasive. 2. More interested in being right than being persuasive.
Claude's overall assessment hit the nail on the head and couldn't have been a more perfect summary of what I shared in my whataboutism article.
This was a classic case of people having different conversations. The author was making a point about epistemology and dialogue. The commenters were making technical arguments about materials. Neither side acknowledged the other's framework. The result? Talking past each other.
And for what really matters, what did Claude think most neutral observers would have done?
Most LinkedIn professionals would probably scroll past this thinking, both have points, neither is listening.
Which is, of course, the exact point. The derailment itself became the case study. The whataboutism worked, not because it persuaded anyone, but like anyone walking into a lounge with a bar fight in progress, they just turn around and head somewhere else for a drink. Lessons from the case study. So, what do we take away from this little social experiment? A few things stood out. 1. First impressions set the tone, and you can't take them back. If the origins are polarizing, expect polarization in return. In attempting to make a nuanced point on a complex issue, I allowed my tone to create the baseline of what was heard, who engaged, and how they engaged. This leads to a critical observation of your internet persona. Every post is someone's first encounter with you. They don't know your backlog, Substack series, or true intent. They only see this post and this tone. You have no past reputation points for most people scrolling by to help provide context. When I tossed out the Plastic Defender Army, I branded myself as combative before anyone got to my actual point. 2. Authority without humility backfires. The main commenter, the expert, wasn't there for persuasion, or if they were, to a neutral observer, it failed. Whether intended or not, their comments were a performance, and they played to their audience who already agreed with them. The louder you shout your credentials, the more defensive you look. Authority can open doors, but when leaned on too aggressively or repeatedly, it closes ears and rolls eyes. Expertise without humility often pushes away the very people you're trying to influence. 3. Different conversations equal no conversation. I wanted to discuss how discourse gets derailed. Others wanted to discuss life cycle assessments and substitution effects. Both are valid topics, but they don't meet in the middle. And the irony was these were the exact things I called out in the video. It was epistemology versus technical detail, and we were two ships passing in the night. 4. The silent audience effect. The most critical point is who was in the room. Online, it's never just the combatants. Online debates aren't really for the loudest participants. The broader audience was the silent scroller. With thousands of impressions and only a handful directly contributing, hundreds never commented but skimmed the tone, posture, and humility. Those are the people you might actually influence. They're far more likely to remember how you showed up than whether you won a stat war. And for those who do engage, it's essential to consider whether you're there to teach, influence, or perform, and consider how others perceive you. 5. Nuance loses in the noise. This is the recursive irony of the whole thing. My post warning about whataboutism was itself drowned out by whataboutism. Nuance or even maintaining the post's original topic was gone. And that's the internet in a nutshell. The more hornets buzzing around your post, the less likely the original point will be the concept that actually stands out. Finding the balance. While I'd love to tell you there's a simple formula for keeping online conversations on track, this whole experience proved there isn't one. You can't force people to engage with your actual point, and you certainly can't control whether they show up ready to discuss or ready to derail. Your only lever is how you show up in the first place and how you respond when the hornets arrive. As much as we want to redirect back to the original intent, we can't just keep repeating, "That's not what I was talking about," and expect it to work. We need to walk a line, acknowledge what they're saying with enough candor to show we're listening, then redirect back to the actual conversation we're trying to have. All redirect sounds dismissive. All engage means you've lost your thread entirely. Neither works. The silent audience, those neutral observers scrolling by, will judge both the content and the dance. They'll notice whether you're rigid or flexible, defensive or curious, conversing or just performing. They'll decide whether you're someone worth engaging with next time. So the goal isn't perfection. It's balancing staying true to your point while showing enough intellectual humility to acknowledge legitimate questions. Control what you can control: your tone, openness, and willingness to meet people at least partway. The rest, let the audience decide for themselves. So here's the takeaway. Facts don't persuade, and tone plays an even more critical role in how our data and ourselves are perceived. Authority without humility is theater, and you're only playing to your side of the crowd. Every time we engage, we audition for the quiet bystanders, letting them decide whether we're worth hearing again. And, to put it more bluntly, if AI thinks you're insufferable, how do you think real humans perceive you? So, the next time the hornets swarm, ask yourself, are you here to solve a problem or just distract from it?